I was talking to this dude the other night on the street at the end of the night. I'm like, you look like a weak pussy. And I'm not saying this to offend you. I'm just saying that other people are likely having that interpretation of you. Probably a lot of weak pussies in here. I am wearing today my Texan aggravating t-shirt. And this is designed to aggravate and upset you. And I hope that you're feeling some sort of discomfort and perhaps a deep-seated rage that I may be bringing our liberal policies to your Lone Star haven of libertarian utopia. So I have a framed photograph of Nancy Pelosi above my bed. I masturbate to it each night. But in any case, with vocal projection, now, a lot of people ask me, they say, Jeff, when I go out at the end of the night, my voice becomes hoarse. Why do you think this happens? Well, what's the conventional wisdom when it comes to vocal projection? What does everybody say? Speak from your gut. Speak from the gut, project from the diaphragm. This is what I heard all my life as well. I don't have amplification here, but those in the back can likely hear me pretty well. That's because we've learned, myself, Owen, we've learned to project. Now, what would happen back in the day, I'd be up here speaking, and then I would perhaps have to go on one of the infield programs. I'd be out for several nights. And I would go on a Sunday or a Monday or whatever the case may be. I'd get into the cab, you know, it's before Uber, and the guy would be like, where you go? I don't know what accent that is. It was probably offensive to someone in here. But he'd be like, where do you want to go? I'm like, airport. I literally couldn't speak. My voice is lost, laryngitis. It's gone. And I would have to pantomime an airplane in order to convey where I want to do it. It's like, okay, I got you. You go airport. You know, and then he'd take me there. So this was very frightening for me, because for somebody who earns their living through speaking, it's sort of like a stripper losing her boobs or something like that. You know, it's what are you going to do? And so I was very, you know, quite frightened by this. And so I had to learn. So I went to my voice coach, Susan Nance, who's she's a 40-year voice professional who lives in San Francisco, and I learned a great deal of things by going to this person. By the way, I may have mentioned to you the other day, you know, I spend about $25,000 on personal mentoring myself every year on different areas, because, you know, I advocate for mentoring. I do it myself because I know that I'm not that fucking smart. You know, when I was younger, I believed that I was smarter than most people. Because that's what all the teachers told me, that's what the test scores indicated, but interestingly enough, that led to me becoming like a fucking underachiever in my adult life, because I coasted through school, so I was like, I don't have to do effort, and then in my adult life, I'm like, oh, actually, you fucking do, and now I've trained myself not to. But the older I get, the more I realize I'm actually quite stupid. I do know a lot of big words, but aside from that, I'm pretty fucking dumb. So I realized I can't know everything. So I went to Susan Nance. Now, by the way, for those of you, you may have heard me say this before, but I was the San Francisco karaoke champion of 2009, I believe, which is something that always sounds much cooler in my mind before I speak it out loud. And you know, people always ask me, they're like, yo, oh, what's your song? What's your song? Like, the champion doesn't have a song. He has a fucking repertoire, right? And so I was a self-taught singer. And as a self-taught singer for 15 years, there were a couple of interesting things that I found out once I started going to professional instruction. So in my mind, and you might relate to this in other areas, so kind of try to map it onto other areas, I had sort of worked out a mental map of how the vocal apparatus functions. And it was very interesting for me to see how that map matched up with reality once I started getting professional instruction, and then seeing certain blank areas, you know, there be dragons type of thing, that was then filled in by learning this. So once I started going there, it was as though my ability to control the instrument gained a lot more variables, if that makes sense. So it was, let's say that before, my voice had like 4 sliders and 2 dials and 2 switches. And now, after having gone to professional instruction, it was like a Dr. Dre soundboard where there's like 10 dials and 15 switches. And I learned about things like resonance and ring and palate control and vowel placement in the mouth and different things like modulating tonality and laryngeal position and things of this nature that I kind of had instinctual understandings of, but I didn't have names for. And so I think that when you start, particularly if you've been engaging with a skill for quite some time, if you then get actual professional instruction in it, you will be quite shocked at, it's very interesting to see where your map matched up with reality and where it was missing information. So one of the biggest things for me was I always thought, coming back to the topic at hand, I always felt that if you wanted to project, you had to force air, like speak from the diaphragm, force air. That will work to create a loud tone. However, it will also damage the vocal folds because they're rubbing together. I don't know what the fuck that was. They're rubbing together like too violently, essentially. And yes, it will create a loud sound, but number one, it won't be healthy. And number two, it won't be as clear, it won't have as much clarity and attractiveness as it could. So what I learned were a couple of things. What do you think is the ultimate foundation for vocal projection? Everyone thinks it's the breath. It's actually posture. So it's your connection to the ground. The basis or foundation of all expressive potential or all projective capacity is your connection to the ground, right? So think about a boxer. When they punch, they don't punch with their arm. Where does the power come from? It comes from the hip rotation and it comes from the hips and the again, connection to the ground. So the first thing that I learned was you need to have proper posture in order to project. And that could be with your face, your voice, your body, even psychological energy or emotional energy. So it all starts with your connection to the earth. So one of the very first things, and I do this on a weekly basis, I do this multiple times per week, I engage in something called Alexander technique. It was developed in the late 1800s by an Australian actor called F. Matthias Alexander. An Australian actor, much like Mel Gibson, insofar as how much anti-Semitism he harbored, I don't know. But this guy, back in the day, he would do Shakespearean monologues. And back then, they didn't really have electrical amplification. He didn't have a fucking mic that he could, boom out to the back of the amphitheater. So it was all vocal. It was just, and of course, they had good acoustics and things of that nature to facilitate that. But he had to speak. And one thing that he noticed, his voice would give out. He'd become hoarse. He was getting a lot of problems with his voice. So he went to a physician. He said, yo, I'm having these difficulties. Is there something medically wrong with me? They examined him. They said, no, nothing seems to be wrong with you. So what he did, he began an intense study of himself, and this eventually led to this sort of psychophysiological retraining regimen that he developed, where he saw himself in a three-way mirror. And what he noticed is that his cervical spine was kind of doing like this. Now, by the way, when I talk like this, listen to how my voice changes when I talk like this versus when I talk like this. Now, I'm not consciously altering that, right? When I talk like this versus when I talk like this, you can tell there's a bit of a pinch quality to it, right? Versus when I talk like this, it seems a little bit more full, like you're talking to the whole person, as opposed to this kind of pinched quality. Now, particularly, there's a couple reasons why this might happen. Number one, we have sort of a startle response, I guess you might call it. Back in the day, if you were walking in the woods and some sort of creature sprang out to attack you, you would you'd freeze up in order to maybe go still so it couldn't see you, it wouldn't detect the movement or something like that. By the way, it's really interesting to me to think how back in the day, and when I'm saying back in the day, I'm talking like 200 years ago, 150 years ago, you could just walk outside and shit would just fucking kill you. That doesn't happen now, unless you're walking in like certain parts of San Francisco, possibly, Crackhead or something like that. But, anyone here ever read Cormac McCarthy? The book, he wrote The Road. He wrote a book called Blood Meridian. Anyone ever read that book? That's one of the most horrifying books I've ever read. Shocked and triggered me, and I'm somebody who is like not easily disturbed. Basically, it tells the story of this kid who joins up with these sort of bounty hunters who are commissioned to go get Indian scalps in like the 1850s. And they just, led by this charismatic figure called the Judge, who's this hairless sort of baby man who's like 6'7" tall, 6'7" inches tall. they just start mercilessly like slaughtering random people for no fucking reason. And they'll be like walking through the woods and all of a sudden like a bear will just grab someone and disembowel them. Or they'll like be sitting at a campfire and like a bat will come down and just start like eating someone's fucking face. Or like it'll just start raining and some guy will die. And you realize like, yeah, that's what used to happen. You would just be walking around and you just die because of the weather, or like some animal would emerge. So yeah, so we have this kind of like startle pattern. Now in modern days, obviously we don't have that, but what we do have, well, kids carry heavy backpacks, which causes a sort of, over time causes this weird posture. You of course got this little thing in your pocket, which you're like, tick-tock. Oh no, 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 oh no, oh no, oh no, no, no. Like, dude, like what? I fucking hate that shit. That fucking song, dude. No, 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 dude, or whatever. You've got, maybe you work at a desk and you start off with good posture in the morning, but by the end you're like, I know what I'm doing, like long hours of possibly like video editing or something, and you're just fucked. By the way, one thing that helped me with that a great deal, anyone familiar with something called the Pomodoro technique? Very interesting. There's a lot of little things I think that you can use to sort of hack your way into just little 5% improvements, 5% improvements. Pomodoro technique is this idea that if you have a large task at hand, what you do, you set a little timer, 25 minutes, you work at it, get up, take a 5-minute break. Another 25 minutes, 5-minute break. 25 minutes, 5-minute break. Another 25 minutes, half-hour break. Repeat. That's been very, very beneficial to me. I just do it on my watch or my Alexa or whatever. But anyway, so over time, you kind of develop this odd posture that you're not really cognizant of or aware of, but it's going to affect how you're projecting over time. Of course, add this into the panoply of other weird tension entanglements that come into play. I was out this weekend with some students, and I see some guys, they're just so fucked, and it's from conditioning. But here's the thing, fixing that starts with what? Awareness. All of this stuff is about awareness, 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 awareness. Awareness without shame, without guilt. Now, look. I was talking to this dude the other night on the street at the end of the night. I'm like, you look like a weak pussy. Do you know what I mean? And I'm not saying this to offend you. I'm not saying this to make you feel bad about yourself. That's not why I'm saying this. I'm just saying that other people are likely having that interpretation of you. I mean, laugh all you want, but some of you are probably also weak pussies as well. Probably a lot of weak fucking pussies in here. Yeah. Myself included, right, in many ways, right? So what do I mean by that? I mean just somebody who's sort of ineffectual, who doesn't assert themselves, who doesn't stand up for themselves, and furthermore, and perhaps most importantly, is just racked with tension, who is racked with tension. They look very held and brittle. There's a sort of brittleness to their life where it's just constant defensiveness and perfectionism and confusion and selfishness and abdication of responsibility and fucking dualistic thinking and self-judgment, negativism. It's just a whole host of these negative social counter conditions that have been instilled in us from a very young age that result in what? That result in us being unable to be free and loose and open. And like, for me, it took, not even took, it continues to take. Right? Because when you're trying to release these things, it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen overnight. But why was I saying that to that guy? I was like, when I say this shit to you, I want you, do you feel mad when I say this shit to you? When I said, you look like a child. I don't think you look like a child. The people you're interacting with think you're a child. They humor you. They humor you when you speak to them. Like, oh, look at the little guy. He's doing his little approach. Oh, but hey, little guy, you're doing so good. we're not gonna fuck you, but like, you're doing so good, little buddy. You're doing so good. Good on, keep at it, fella. And one day, maybe you'll be the guy that we can respect. That's what it is. You know what's funny? Sometimes they try to do that shit to me still. I go up and they're like, hey, little guy. Like, I sense them doing that to me. Like, they're like, oh, look at him doing it. It's like, do you have any fucking idea who the fuck I am? No, they don't. They don't. Nobody knows shit about you. Nobody knows shit about you. They don't know shit about you, your style, nothing until you bring it to their ass. So what do I say in those situations? Like, I had someone say to me the other day, they're like, I've been talking to you for the last 10 minutes. I'm like, oh, well, thank you so much for talking to me. I'm such a fucking loser. I really need people to talk to me, so I really appreciate that. Thank you. And when I say it like that, they're like, oh, okay. He ain't one of them. He ain't that. You know, or I'll be like, you know, I get the impression that you're patronizing me now. When you do that, can you also give me the little dog pat on the arm, too? There you go, little buddy. Yeah, I'd like that as well. That would really help my self-esteem. Kind of go meta with it. You know, I say, look, I get what you're doing here, and I ain't the one. You know, so, but long story short, why did I say that to this guy? I'm like, I want you to become angry. You should feel angry when I say these things to you, because you need to get the emotional leverage to say, no more. Ya basta de fucking tonterías. I'm not going to, this will not stand any longer. What is it going to fucking take for you to arrive at the conclusion that the way I've been living cannot continue? This cannot fucking continue. I do not care if the next person I speak to sets me on fucking fire, douses me with kerosene, fucking throws a match on my ass, I immolate, like those fucking monks in Vietnam on the cover of the fucking Rage Against the Machine album. Great album, by the way. Killing in the name of, yeah, I don't give a shit if that happens. I just don't want to hear nice to meet you again. I just don't want to hear it again. Well, you know, it was real nice to meet you. No, dude, no. No. And this doesn't mean that I'm trying to offend people or trying to go out of my way to be outrageous for the sake of being outrageous, because that's another mask. You know, sometimes I get people who are like, enough, now I'm going to be the person who says ludicrous things to be offensive for the sake of being offensive. It's like, no, that's another facade. That's another way to shield your real personality from judgment. Look, I'm just going to go up to people, I'm going to put my fucking personality on the chopping block, and either they're going to they'll be like, yo, I want to join. Look, think of it like this. When you want to meet someone, let's say you're here, they're here. This is an analogy, okay, and I've used this many times. You may have heard me say this before. They've got their space around them. You've got your space around you. And there's a space in between. It's conceptual, not just physical, but it's also kind of physical. If you want to connect with the person, you have to somehow cross that middle space. There's a couple ways you can approach this. Number one, you can just jump across the chasm and be like, hey, come on, do you like me? Do you like me? Do you like me? What do you say? Do you like me? What if I do this? Do you like me if I do this? Do you like me if I do that? What does that have a tendency to do? Well, they're like, okay, he's coming, I'm going to defend. Okay, I don't know. And maybe after enough of this, yeah, I'm bored. I guess I'll hang out with this person. Yeah, okay. That can work. That can work. Option number two. You make no attempt to cross the chasm whatsoever. You simply sit here and you're like, I'm the cool, aloof, rock star, alpha. I'm just going to sit here and be super fucking cool, and people are just going to come to me. That will almost never happen. That will almost never happen. Almost never. I go out a lot. I would say about 2 times a year, I will just be standing there wearing some odd garment or doing some weird behavior, and someone will in fact approach me. Maybe like 2 times a year, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. They'll come up to me like, who are you? That's certainly nothing that you want to base a life strategy around. Stand there and appear cool and hope people come to you. It's like, dude, it's not a good strategy. Okay, so option A, eager puppy dog, come on, please like me. No, thank you, maybe. Aloof guy, super cool rock star James Bond guy, unlikely to work. Here's what you want to think about instead, or an alternative that you might want to consider. Put yourself in the middle space. Don't crowd people. Put yourself in the middle space and invite them to meet you in the middle. Again, it's not competitive, it's collaborative. It's like, look, I'm 46 years old, dude. I look at myself in the mirror in the morning, I say, there's Jeff. Here he is. I guess this is how it turned out. This is how the Jeffrey Allen epigenetic experiment fucking turned out. It's not going to change in the near future, barring some sort of catastrophic life event, like an amputation, or I win the lottery or something. Like, it's not gonna, and even then, we've all heard those tales of people who have these very dramatic life events. They'll be really happy for 6 months or really depressed for 6, and then they kind of return to baseline where they were before. Like, this is it. And a lot of people in here are pretty young, and you're still really not like, well, maybe I could be different. It's like, dude, this is it, dude. This is fucking it. I've come to grips with it. I like it well enough, I suppose. You know, always trying to improve. Really trying to be aware, cognizant of my own blind spots. Taking advice of my peer group when they offer it. Not dismissing it out of hand, actively seeking it out from people I respect and admire, actively trying to surround myself with other people who are on the same path towards achieving what I want to achieve and who are, you know, doing things that I admire. That's huge too, by the way. But ultimately, this is it. And look, if you like it, you like it. If you don't, you don't. And that's fine either way. I think that a lot of people give that lip service, but they don't really believe it. You know what I mean? They say, yes, I get it. I'm for some, not for others. However, when somebody rejects them, they still take it to heart. I believe it was Chuck D who said what? Don't let a win get to your head or a loss to your heart.